Okay, so let us get started. I'm going to share my screen and we will begin. So thank you all for joining us for Mass Creatives Biweekly Virtual Policy and Action Update. It is Friday, November 13th. And since we are a biweekly virtual policy and action update, we have not met since the general election. And so I want to start out looking at those results. So here is sort of a quick overview of the federal election results. So Biden is forecasted to have 290 electoral votes. Arizona was called yesterday for Biden officially. The Senate is right now has 50 Republicans have been elected, 48 Democrats, and there is a runoff in Georgia for 2 more seats. In the U.S. House, there are 218 Democrats elected, 202 Republicans, and then there are 15 seats remaining where they are either in runoffs or votes are still being tallied. My source for this information is the New York Times. So if you have other sources that are telling you differently, by all means, just so you know that's where the source is. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in depth, but you'll notice on the slide at the bottom, it says fourth stimulus bill, and it says McConnell and Pelosi in negotiations. So, one of the things that happened, I think it was 2 days ago, is that McConnell actually stepped in and it seems like for the first time in a while, decided to engage on negotiations around a fourth stimulus bill. And Secretary of the Treasury Mnuchin sort of stepped back. And so that is an interesting evolution of this. Again, the Senate seems to be holding firm on this idea that they want to do a much smaller stimulus bill, recovery bill, and the House, even with the Heroes 2.0 version of stimulus, is looking for more money, specifically around state and local aid. So negotiations will continue. We work with our partners, Americans for the Arts, who lead some of the advocacy around the issues that we are paying attention to. Those include state and local aid. It also includes specific and directed recovery funds for the nonprofit sector, for the creative sector, both the nonprofit and the private sector. So we'll talk a little bit more in a second about that. Over in the federal area for Massachusetts, here is our congressional delegation. So Senators Markey and Warren. Warren was not running for re-election. Markey was. Markey was re-elected. And then in terms of our members of Congress, all of our incumbents who were running for office were re-elected. Jake Auchincloss, was elected to District 4. That was the district seat held by Joe Kennedy III, who decided not to run for re-election in order to run for Senate. I also want to just note here, and some of you who joined us for a member post-election analysis remember this slide. I've also noted the chairmanships that some of these folks hold. So Congressman Richard Neal is chair of Ways and Means, and Congressman Jim McGovern is chair of Rules. These are two of the most powerful chairmanships you can hold in Congress. The chair of Rules basically decides what bills are actually brought to the floor. And then chair of Ways and Means is the one who is sort of looking at the money. And so I want us to make sure that we are clocking that as advocates, that and there's no reason to believe that either one of them will lose their chairmanships in the next session. But just to clock that these folks do have power and have impact in these chairmanships, and we should think about that in our advocacy. So then getting more focused on the state. So the state Senate, here are the election results. So there are going to be 37 Democrats and 3 Republicans. There are 2 new members of the Senate, both Democrats, from the Worcester Middlesex district and then from the Hampden district. This means they have a super majority, which means that, overriding vetoes by the governor is basically absolutely possible. That continues to be the case. Maureen reminds me, yes, that Catherine Clark is also in House leadership. She is the vice chair of the House Democratic Caucus. She also, fun fact, sat on the platform development committee for the Democratic National Convention. So she is someone that we should be paying attention to and has leadership position and has influence in conversations that we might care about. So that's the Senate. And then on the House side, again, the Democrats continue to hold a majority. This is a list of all of our newly elected members of the House of Representatives. If you see your district on this list, how fantastic. You have a new member of the House to connect with and introduce yourself with and let them know that you care about the arts and you care about public service, and share a little bit about what you're doing and why it matters. They will, okay, yes, okay, so they will be sworn in at the beginning of January. So now I want to talk a little bit about like what's next. And my tongue in cheek on the federal side is, who knows? Obviously we're watching how this transition is playing out. We're also watching, there's a lot of focus on those two Senate seats in Georgia because that will decide control of the Senate. But in the meantime, I just want to touch briefly on something that we brought up on our last call, which was executive orders, right? So President Trump had signed a number of executive orders that potentially had negative repercussions for us, right? So one of them was that any federal funding that was made, if it in any part had to do with discriminating against a group specifically.
If you're not hot,
And it seemed like the order was written,
turn on the heat.
that the federal funding could be pulled. So that was something that a number of our colleagues, national colleagues, signed letters requesting that President Trump actually rescind that order. Doesn't look like he's going to, but there's already been court cases challenging that order. And then once President-elect Biden is sworn in, there's very good reason to believe that he will quickly move to rescind a lot of those orders. There is a process that has to happen, but we're confident that we can sort of take we can move that down in terms of our priority of advocacy that is needed, right? So I just wanted to recap on that. And then the transition process, right? So I'm sure if you're reading the news or listening to the news, you're hearing how the GAO, which is the Government Accountability Office, is slowing down the transition process. But more importantly, President-elect Biden is naming folks in his transition team and on his different work groups. And there is actually a agency review committee around arts, culture, and the humanities. And I think it's also the sciences. And if you go to buildbackbetter.com, which is President-elect Biden's transition page, you can see who those members are. We are working really diligently with national partners to make sure that as Biden is putting together his transition plans, he is also thinking and including the arts community in his recovery transition plans. So know that that is also happening. Then I want to just talk a little bit about what's happening on the state level for what's next. So I'll go into more detail in a minute about the fiscal year 21 budget, but in like 6 seconds, the fiscal year 22 budget is about to have to get released. So if the process normally is in January, the governor releases their version of the budget, and then we sort of start that process with March, where there's a House version. We go into the spring, where there's a Senate version. They have to conference that version, and then by July we have our fiscal year budget. We're all crossing our fingers that we're actually going to do it that way, but that's something that we're going to be looking at. Then the other piece is that because we are in a 2-year legislative session, right, and we're in the second year of that 2 years, all legislation that was filed at the beginning of that first year, if it's not passed by the end of the session, and the session ends on December 31st, those bills go away. So they either have to be refiled, or the folks who are in support of them say, like, I give up. So in terms of that, there are like 4 very important bills that are currently in conference committee, including that economic development bond bill. There's also a transportation bill. There's also an environmental bill. But the one that, we're really focused on and that you have all really helped out with advocacy and advocating for and talking about is that economic development bond bill. That committee is still in conference. There is every reason to believe that it will come out with a conferenced version and it will pass through the legislature. The timing of that is unknown. If you look at past history, they kind of wait until the last minute and they use the pressure of the clock to force negotiations. So we will be tracking that, paying attention to that, and giving you updates as it moves forward, even up until the very end of December. Then the other piece is so legislation, and then as I said, the next session starts in January, and so our newly elected members of the legislature will be voted in or be sworn in. They've already voted in. Now they get to be sworn in. So that's sort of like a very mini version of what's going to happen next. So the thing to just I guess my headline for this, or my sub headline, is it's a weird year. We all know that. And so we're all going to have to just be a little bit more vigilant. And you may be getting emails from Mass Creative about issues that you'd never expect to hear from us about at the end of December. But we're going to just try to keep moving forward and just keep everybody informed so that we can be united in our advocacy efforts. So then let's talk about the fiscal year 21 budget. So I think the last time we had this call, the House had released their version. And they had, we know that Governor Baker released his version, his revised version, and he recommended 16.3 for the Mass Cultural Council. And just as context, the Mass Cultural Council budget is the largest mechanism for distributing public dollars to the creative sector in Massachusetts. You all know that, but it's just a good recap and a refresher. The House put in a recommendation of 18.1. That is the same amount that was included for the Mass Cultural Council in fiscal year 20. So it's level funding. But it's important to remember that we're in a really odd year, okay? The other things you can see on this slide, they included $5.3 billion for Chapter 70, that's local aid and education funding, which it has implications for arts education inclusion in communities across the Commonwealth, $4 million for small business technical assistance grants, and $0 for a regional economic development grant that Baker had recommended at $6 million. So then yesterday, the Senate Ways and Means released their version of the budget. And as you can see, it also included 18.1 million. It also included 5.3 billion for Chapter 70, as well as 4 million for the Small Business Technical Assistance Grant. And the Senate included 6 million for the Regional Economic Development Grant. So it's the same amount that Baker did. So this is wild, right? Because the House hasn't finished debating their amendments, although they were doing huge bundled amendments last night. But they are still working on debating their version. And usually the Senate waits until the House is done with their version before releasing theirs. So it's a little bit of an overlap. We are hearing that by 10 p.m. tonight, all of the Senate amendments are due. We'll be tracking those. And if there are any that feel particularly important for us to pay attention to, either because they are suggesting really large earmarks on that Mass Cultural Council budget, or they're, in years past, we've seen them try to do other things related to the Mass Cultural Council budget, we will alert you and we will be, doing our job and our due diligence to advocate. I think you'll notice the bottom of the slide I have put in bold for a reason. Both of these budgets use CARES money, Medicaid reimbursement, and the rainy day fund in order to get to a balanced budget. So constitutionally, Massachusetts has to pass a balanced budget. The fact that both versions, both the House and the Senate, have dipped in, and Baker have dipped into the rainy day fund, means that we're not doing great, right? It means that state revenues are down. And historically, traditionally, when state revenues go down, we see that the Mass Cultural Council budget goes down. So while I recognize, and we all at Mass Creative recognize, that level funding for the Mass Cultural Council is not our end goal. We continue to realize that it's not nearly the sufficient funding. I do want to just sort of footnote here that the fact that it was level funded in a year when they had to dip into the rainy day fund in order to balance the budget is meaningful. And so we are going to release later on today an action alert to our email list, and we'll post it on social media. That'll include a note that you can write to your legislator. It will thank them for supporting 18.1 million for the Mass Cultural Council. And then it will also include some data points about what the impact of COVID-19 has been to the creative sector and why continued relief and recovery for the creative sector is necessary. Okay, so I want you to be on the lookout for that. And we're gonna, so there's my slide. I went in advance. So the other thing I just want to do, like a quick little reminder, is like personal stories matter. And you all know that, you've heard me say that a million times. So we'll do that action alert, but we will make it editable. So if you have the additional 3 seconds to write in and say, I run an arts organization, and over the last 6 months, here's what we've seen happen. More people than ever are asking to like be part of our work. And more than ever, we are like struggling to make ends meet, right? That really matters. Data matters. We'll include some data points in the email format, and then be courteous, right? There are lawmakers get communication from constituents all the time that's rude or disrespectful. Have yours stand out because it's not. That actually matters. So personalized includes data and stories of impact, and then be courteous. Those are the 3 things to keep in mind when you are communicating with a lawmaker. So I want to make sure, and we just put, G is going to put a link in the chat box to the Mass Cultural Council COVID-19 Impact Survey Round 4. But here are just some of the top points to note. This is a cumulative study. So every time that they survey the field, they are adding the dollars up, so that we're getting a full picture of, since March, what has happened to the creative sector. You can see we are close to $500,000 in COVID-19 related losses. Apologies for my typo. We've also seen 30,000 cultural sector jobs impacted. And then the creative community, individual workers and artists have also reported 20 million in lost income and canceled gigs, and 39,000 canceled gigs. So this is the data that you all feel and that you know, but this is helpful in our continued advocacy. I'm just going to do my little NPR Pledge Drive shout out. So, hey guys, I just want to thank you. Actually, this is fun. I get to thank you. So we technically launched our campaign on this call 2 weeks ago. And since then we're almost halfway, and we're setting a December 31st deadline for this campaign. And so the fact that we're like over the quarter mark, and we are, and we're past the quarter, we're not even to the quarter mark date wise, is so fantastic. And it just means the world to me and G and the rest of the Mass Creative team that you all are stepping up and helping us continue to do our work by supporting us financially. So there is a link in the chat box to our fall fundraiser. You will see both a button where you can give one time, or you can help us reach our other goal. So we've got this $5,000 money goal, and then we also have a goal of increasing the number of our monthly donors by 12. That's like big. Right now we have 12, so we're trying to like double the number of monthly givers. You guys all know what monthly giving means. It's just another way for us to continue to have sustained support throughout the year, and it really does matter. So we posted on Facebook a little donate button on our most recent post about this. So if that's a way that you want to share this information with your networks, feel free. I'm not going to stop you. But it does just really help, being on these calls with all of you, seeing your faces, seeing your great questions, keeps us going. And then to know that you also are supporting us, not just with your time, but with your treasure, it means a lot. So thank you. And we got to keep going. So my final note is that we are not going to have a policy and action update the day after Thanksgiving. We are going to take that day off. So you will see us again on Friday, December 4th. I'm sure there will be updates. We'll update you via email and social media, but we won't be back together again until December 4th. So please plan accordingly. Thank you so much. Thank you for going over just a little bit of time this morning. I appreciate it. I appreciate you. And have a good weekend. Get outside, enjoy some fresh air. See you later.